Welcome. This is Smart Nonsense, take number 2. I don't think you'll hear the first one, thank God. Here we talk about entrepreneurship, self-development, and challenging norms. I'm here with Henry Belcaster. We are talking about a great book today, Rework by Jason Fried and DHH. I don't want to pronounce his name, but this is a fantastic book.
Who? There's a second author?
David Heinemeier Hansen. I want to say that's how you say his name.
Huh.
He is, just so everyone knows, they started Basecamp, a couple other projects and stuff, but I recognize Basecamp. It's a company that's based in Chicago, actually, but big on remote work and
Small team,
a ton
right?
of
15, 16 people, maybe more now.
Yeah, it's as small as possible. I think this book, I just love these books that are going against the grain. You hear all these traditional stuff. Even I was listening to what I thought was going to be today's podcast, but then you changed it last minute on me. I was listening to Sarah Dietschy, and she was talking to another YouTuber. I'm forgetting his name, some tech guy. And she was putting him on a pedestal for having this 20-plus person company. And it's been so backward. It's like, why are we measuring companies and success by how many people are working?
Status, baby. It all comes down to, I think it was in this Jason Fried, maybe a separate podcast, but you tell someone you've made a company that employs 6, 7 people, like, oh, that's nice. That's nice. But you tell them you run a 300-person company and it's like, but which one's more profitable? Maybe
well, that's what he was saying.
Or which one's happier?
You could say, oh, I work, we have a 15-person company, and they're like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's like a startup. But that could be Craigslist. And you started one of the largest online companies there is. So it's just, especially nowadays with the difference in leverage that you can have on the internet, it's a faulty metric.
Well, that's what I think Jason Fried gets so right, is he's like, get out of here, Silicon Valley startup culture. Get out of here like big tech. You guys don't even know how to make a product, even Amazon for a long time. Like, you don't know how to make something that brings in more money than it costs to produce. And his big thing is like, just have one customer, nail it, make sure that you're profitable from customer number 1, so that when you get to 10 or 1,000 or in Basecamp's, 20, 50,000 customer territory, you're profitable all the way along.
It's funny because people put this mental image in their head of, oh, we have to be this startup that's getting funded in Silicon Valley that's going to raise $10 million. And that's the metric, is usually like, how much can you raise? And we'll worry about profit later. We'll worry about this. And he's like, I'm going to say Jason just because I don't know the author as well, but he's basically like, screw all that. Like, let's even discard with the whole entrepreneur term and just call it a starter. Like, it shouldn't be this big. What?
I got this little Superman crow. I can't have that.
God damn it. You waste my time.
It won't go away.
Don't. And I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. All right. Maybe that's going to get us there faster. People look at that. My point being that there's this just wrong vision of what it is to start a business. And it should be just find your one customer, however many customers, prove that you're providing core value, whatever you're doing. And it doesn't have to be extravagant. It should be just simple, but solving a problem, and you can make money from day one.
I like his take too on the 8-hour workday. So after that, you're up and running, unless you want to go back a bit further.
It's kind of, in my head, it's chronological, as in like, first we start with who should be getting into this stuff.
Yes. Who's this book for?
I was thinking about this. I think, honestly, anyone at a company where they have a little bit of control, so like anything 30 or below, it's mandatory reading. Anything beyond that, it's just an easy, fun, quick read. Like Belky told me 45 minutes ago, we're not doing what I thought was going to be today's episode. I already read Rework, but I read it again in 45 minutes on 3.5 times speed.
Yeah, I think it was 2 hours on Audible.
Right.
It's like a podcast.
But it's amazing too, because that's one of his points, is when you do have I guess I'm kind of going too far ahead, but when you do have like your company starting and you have your products, everyone's like MVP, just get whatever out. But you don't want like the half-assed products. But you do want it to be half as good as you think it, or like half the maybe effort, or I'm not sure. Like, you don't want the half-baked, but you still you want to cut in half whatever you think it has to be, basically. Um, for
That
example,
goes,
this book.
yeah.
This book was much longer. He said it was at least twice as long. And he's like, screw that. We don't need it. Let's condense it to 2.5 hours, get the essence of all the unique messages we
It's
have.
definitely an essence. That too was like the innovation stack where, there was some clash between the two. In this, Fried's saying, don't copy, like worst things come out of competition and copying. Whereas the innovation stack was like copy to get started. We don't have to get into that. But his quick iteration, I really like his elaboration on decision making. It's like, if you spend a lot of time making decisions, then you're locked into those high impact decisions. He's like, make decisions quick. Stop saying, but then this, or what if this, or this could. It's like the innovation stack. Make a decision, and then your questioning should become, so we have to. We did this, so now we have to do this. So we have to do this, and just let that carry you through the whole innovation process.
Yeah, I think it's fun when you think of it like this. Like, hey, we have these ideas, but the only way to really see if they're good or not is just to throw them out in the market and see what happens. Gary Vee talks about this a lot. But that's so fun when it's like, hey, the world is your playground and you can see what gets traction, what pulls you in what direction, and you just keep stacking on top of that. Uh, there's just so many cool ideas. If we go kind of chronologically, like one, it breaks down. There's so much like disregarding old like big company stuff like, oh, you gotta grind. If you're tired, what the hell are you doing? You have to be a workaholic. All these misconceptions. It's like, hey, if you're tired, take a nap because you're not going to be creative, and creative is where the smart decisions get made. That
He even goes
the
against the grain for
strategy.
startups. And like we say all the time, like sprint, sprint, sprint when you're excited, when you're inspired by something. He's like, not even sprinting is healthy. He says, like, you should, yes, you can have an 8-hour workday, but you shouldn't feel exhausted or like just totally beat up after that 8 hours. I think he says, it's like 8 hours is like a flight from New York to probably the eastern side of Europe, right? And 4 hours into that flight, if you've done it, you're checking your watch, you're like, oh wow, 8 hours is a really long time. And 8 hours is a long time. This is something I struggle with, is like, I never feel like I have enough time in the day. But if you're focused for those 8 hours on the one or two things you have to do, as opposed to showing up to work and doing all the busy emailing and conferencing and meetings, which we should talk about, makes you feel like you're working for 8 hours straight, but you've never really gotten anything done. That's the big difference.
I'm changing my mind on who should read this book because I think it's everyone.
Yeah.
Now that I'm thinking, it's like, okay, everyone is in this mindset of like, oh no, I clocked in for 8 hours. I must have gotten something accomplished. But he's approaching it differently. Like, hey, let's have these goals, and you can have big goals, but break it down into like 1 week chunks or whatever the chunk is, and then just focus on that. You prioritize the sub tasks within that, but make sure you just focus on the top thing, on the priority. Then you work to the second one. And it's just a lot of segmentation because you can get a little win when you break it down. I actually listened to, I think it was on David Perel. By the way, David Perel and Jason Fried, that's where I first heard of this, I think. Great podcast. But another one with David, I'm forgetting who the guest was, but they were talking about how you can't light a log on fire, but you can if you take an axe and break it into smaller pieces of wood, and then you can burn the whole thing. So it's this idea of just like everything in life, really try and break it down. I think I want to do that even with our 1,000 YouTube subscriber goal. Everything, I'm rethinking how lofty it is and how
you're like, how do we get to 10? How do we get to 100? How do we get to 150? He talks about that in terms of making to-do lists shorter. It's like, you're not going to get 100 things done, but you can get 10 things done if you kind of expand the scope. I think he puts a lot of things, or maybe it was a program he was doing, or maybe it was Basecamp deadlines, I can't remember, but into 6-week periods, so that like you need to be able to see some light at the end of the tunnel. There has to be some goals that are lofty, but also achievable. Because if you're just working to infinity and you're just chasing things that are 5, 10, 20 years out, it's like, how are you ever going to be happy? You got to be micro reassessing.
Yeah, I think Yeah, that 6 weeks. It's kind of that balance. I've heard like a month to 2 months, so 6 weeks right in the middle, and it does. It's like, oh, there's the finish line. It seems not that far off, but it's still you know how
And
to get
he
there.
talks about Parkinson's law, my favorite. I literally cannot remember what was in this book and what was in the podcast. I'm sure they're similar because, people talk about the same things over and over again. But 6 weeks too, like if you're giving yourself that deadline, Parkinson's law, man, says it's going to get done. It's going to get done. It's going to fill whatever
Well,
space you allow for a project.
okay. The micro example of this was Henry and I getting in an argument over when to have this podcast. I finally settled on doing it when Henry wanted to originally. He was trying to push it up on me, got me all nervous, and I'm like, all right, I have this 2.5 hour book. I got to read it in the next 45 minutes if I want to be prepared. I ended up skipping like the last 10% of it, whatever, but you get the essence. You'll figure it out. You get on the podcast. It's still going to be great.
Because you cut out all the bullshit. I think I was watching a video. Let's say you want to write a one-page essay. Well, you're going to take a shower. Let's say you have a week to do it. Or sorry, you have 24 hours to do it. You're going to take a shower. You're going to get out a pencil. You're going to sharpen the pencil. You're going to sit down with the piece of paper. You're going to think a little bit. Okay, bad. Now let's say you have 2 hours to finish that essay. You're going to cut out the shower. You're going to use a pen instead of a pencil. You're going to sit down and you're just going to get to writing. Like, that's the beauty of Parkinson's law. And here we were yet again. We got what we wanted to get done material wise. We were here 1 minute late, and
I was here 2 minutes early.
Me, sorry. It's just, man, this stuff gets done.
It does.
I can't be more of a fan.
You brought up meetings, and this is kind of connected where, hey, these meetings are too long. I think he was the one that coined the term 7-minute meeting. And that's what we're doing. We're doing our like 7-minute Mondays, or I think we call it Master Plan Monday, but I think we'll change the name.
Who said a meeting has to be 30 minutes and 1 hour and an hour and a half slot? Like, who said that?
That's
meeting
one
can
of
be
those
9 minutes.
Ideas that's say Peter Thiel's like, what does everyone believe? Oh, meetings have to be in these increments of at least 15, 30 minutes. And it's like, no, that's just arbitrary numbers. It just fits nicely in a calendar if you're dividing it, but whatever, who needs to do that? So he recommends one, having a timer. So say it's 7 minutes. It's like at 7 minutes, it's done. And I've heard this before with, I think even Tim Ferriss says it when he's working on stuff, just actually set a timer and you can't work on it after that. So that makes sure you use those 7 minutes well. You come in with an agenda. I think that's nothing crazy, but you also have, here's the problem, here's the solution, something actionable every single meeting. And that way you just get the fluff away. Because I think a good metric that he had and that I like is, what's the information per minute here? And you kind of say this stuff to me, Henry, because you keep declining all my FaceTimes.
Not because
and
of
you're like,
information
send it in a
minute.
text. Can it be a text? And I'm like,
so Naval, here's this. I love this workflow. What can be done in a meeting can be done on the phone. If it can be done on the phone, it can be said in an email. If it can be emailed, it can probably be texted. And if it can be texted to you, you probably already know what it is. It's like your last resort ever should be to get in a meeting or on the phone with someone. It's a monstrous waste of time.
That's the same thing. We had this similar sort of mindset within dating and stuff like that. And it's like going up, and some people have this elaborate, like, oh, I got to woo the person or whatever. But if you can break it down to complete nonverbals. Like you say this long sentence. No, you break it down into like one word, or you just break it down into like a wink or like just a weird nod or like a squint or something like that. And then after that, you don't even pay attention. Like you can really break anything down. I think that's the core of Twitter, why people love it, because you trim the fat.
You trim the fat. You're not getting a page-long email from someone. You're just like giving them 100 characters. And I think, I think that's why people are so responsive on Twitter, is it's so quick.
I'm loving, I think from now on, because we had Derek Sivers' book, Anything You Want, and it had similar 40 messages and like quick chapters. Anytime I see a book with small chapters, like 1.5 minutes long in this one, I know it's going to be good. Yeah. And I know if I see it's under 3 hours, it's like, okay, they spent the time.
Be careful, because since I've like upped my media consumption to, 3 times the speed, I can't watch movies anymore. I got to like retrain myself. They're so painfully slow.
We got to see Tenet together.
Whatever that is, but yeah.
It's
hey, your bike just got here. today.
Hell
I
yeah.
haven't brought it in yet.
I can't wait. I might start my own vlogs just so people know. Subscribe on YouTube. You can just search Dylan Jardon.
Back to the book. What do you want? What do you want? I liked underdoing your competition. It's like if you are in the rat race with someone, just kind of go backwards. Like break it down, do something simpler, solve one customer's problem.
I loved, if we go off of that, I loved the example that they had in the book of think of the flip camera. I don't know if you used this back in the day.
I might have missed this. This was
my introduction to videography because I think I was in middle school or something. And, all the middle school friends trying to make videos. My buddy had a flip. I had a flip. And you go out, it's just one button. It has a USB in it. It'll plug right into the computer. It had nothing of like a DSLR or anything like that. All those complex settings. It wasn't competing on features. It was just, here's the simple problem. It's too hard to shoot for novices. And they solved it. And so you don't have to outcompete anyone that's big, a Sony or whatever company
then they got
it is.
shafted. Gary Vee started on a flip camera. I remember him saying.
I don't know why they got shafted. Probably
GoPro,
a lot of
maybe?
reasons. Could be.
I think they sold to Walmart. I don't know.
What I like connected to that is just have your core formula. Like what is your core competency as a company or even as a person, and just focus on that. And everything else is just fluff. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. But you really got to just get to the essence of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that's one reason why I'd recommend this to anyone that's working too, is because you want people questioning why for everything. Like, hey, why are we doing this? Does this get to our core competency? Or is this like gonna change the bottom line? Is this gonna make us more profitable? Always asking that. And that's one of my concerns in general with outsourcing and stuff like that, is people are just like too okay with just nodding and listening. It's like, we don't want that. We want the people. He calls it like a one person manager. I forget the exact term, but like they'll just ask all these questions. And I think that's actually, I'm rambling, but I think the 7-Minute Monday, I almost want to come and like every week we ask these questions of, hey, what are we working on? I wrote them down. Like why are we doing this? Like assess every step of our process and really see, do we need to be doing YouTube descriptions or tags or anything, or is our energy better spent elsewhere?
Definitely. I think this kind of goes back to traditional tech companies. It's like, I think they end up doing a lot of things, hiring quickly, expanding, scaling fast, because it's like traditional to do those things. But no one asks why. No one asks why, like, why is this meeting 30 minutes and nothing got done for the last 18?
That's such an underrated word. That might be the best word in the English language.
What is that? The Socratic method. Isn't that all why?
Everything's why. Yeah. First principles, Socratic method. I love my Wait But Why blog.
First principles is rocking my world. There was another one, a quick example. Last night we were cooking. We were using the sous vide machine, right? It has a cord that plugs into the wall. And a pot was boiling near it and melted the cord. And so like the whole fuse, like the whole thing exploded. The fuse blew. The cord was melted. And Athena was really upset that she was going to have to get me a new machine. My mom was like, oh, you're going to have to buy a new sous vide machine. And I was like, no, like if you understand how to fix things, like I can replace that wire. I can cut out, solder, and replace that wire. That's why I love first principles.
Right.
Is like everyone thinks something happens and it's ruined. But if you understand why things are the way they are, why this is made this way, how this cord fits into the back of the machine, you have a lot of power. You have a lot of power to...
Literally, power.
It is power.
Bring the power
1,600
back.
watts.
I think this... I got to reread this book, but the Richard Feynman, surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman, he's the archetype of someone that breaks stuff down into first principles, asks why, really understands what's going on. And it's funny because he'd talk about stuff like that. He used to fix radios, I believe, as a kid. And he'd get into the house and he'd have to pretend to be like screwing around just for an extra 30 minutes. So people thought that he was working hard. When really he figured out you just got to solder this wire.
Why did he have to? Why do people have to think he was working hard?
Because if he goes in and solves your problem in 30 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
They're not going to pay you. But if you're like, sweating and, you're trying really hard, it's like, oh, he worked hard. I do this with barbers all the time. I'm like, oh, they spent a little bit of extra time. They do a little shave or something. I'm like, he's trying hard. But I mean, the net
That
product,
hot
I don't know if it's
foam.
any better. But
Yeah.
so I think that it's just, you focus on asking why, get people that ask why. And interesting, like the book appeals to me so much because you'll hear people like Gary Vee or Derek Sivers, and it kind of caused his demise, but they'll hire very liberally and just try and expand. Like growth is the mindset. Here's the opposite. Like nothing stable is going to come from this very quick growth. Like you see, I don't know, like bamboo shoots going up, but they're not as strong as an oak tree that's taken years.
Wow. Wow.
I'm saying this because I love the tree analogy within the podcast with David Perel.
That, and then you sent me another great tree thing about being protected. Throw that one out really quick. Being protected from the wind.
That was on Facebook.
That was more like coddling of the American mind, but
I think was it because of Mars, they were testing like growing trees in different environments, and so they put a tree in a bubble. I don't know if this is real. It seemed real because it was an Uber fact.
We'll take it.
But they grew it in this confined environment and like no outside variables, just the tree growing by itself. And they noticed that it got super strong and it just, the trunk couldn't hold itself and it'd fall over and die. And they're like, why is this?
Super strong?
It didn't get super strong.
Oh, I thought you said it did.
I might have. It didn't. It just basically wilted like a flower and died. And they realized that there's no wind in this environment. And the wind is that resistance that makes you strong. And so it never had to adapt. And there you go. So
never built the muscle. I mean, that's anti-fragility, right? Is this outside thing, this probably has nothing to do with rework, maybe it does, but this outside factor, while it might be dangerous or break you down in the short run, it's actually the reason you're so much stronger, even as a tree. I think even if it's not true, it's just a great example.
That's why I think it's key focusing on the core, the business. Like, what is the problem that you solve? Your solution. Are you making money from that? They talk about in the podcast the tree. You have like the exterior of like, oh, look how big this tree is. Look how big this company is. Whatever. But what really matters is just the root system. What's holding it in the ground and keeping it strong. And that's what's going to come from just
that's culture. That was what's so cool about you hiring the team around this podcast. Is you can see it. I can see it because I'm in that circle, but you're so focused on the roots and the long run and the long game rather than like throwing up a tree today and it without any, what are those called? External factors, maybe?
Sure. The wind. Yeah, I think that's the essence. It's like you're playing the long game. Why? I think this is from the podcast, but why does everyone think that you have to IPO next year?
Yeah.
You don't. Like you're trying to do this for life. And think about the people that do IPO. Sure, you make a lot of money in a very rare case if you're successful. But then you're like, you get the bug. And like you can think about, what's his name? Something Shea of Zappos. And like,
hey, you're not making sure you have enough headspace above your head for Erica. You got a big head. Sorry, this is for the video.
I forgot. Erica trashed my headspace.
All right, Zappos.
Well, Zappos, like it was the company before Zappos, but like he sold it, made some money, but he quickly got bored and wanted to work on something else. And why? Oh, actually, that was interesting because the company grew so fast that he didn't recognize people that were working for him anymore. So it was this foreign place, and I think there's actually a chapter in this book about that. But basically he sold it and I was like, I want to do something, had to start Zappos. But most people, your second baby isn't going to be as good as your first one. So just focus on that, make it like a company that can last years. I think a couple other points I liked with hiring related stuff.
Yes, that was great. Great chapter.
I mean, you really want to
10 chapters.
We've had it ourselves of like, we do it where Henry's edited videos, I've edited videos. We've done the show notes.
Yeah, he says do it yourself first.
Exactly. Understand it, and then you know what to hire for. You know when someone's doing a good job, a bad job, etc., and you can point them in the right direction versus, oh, we have no idea how to video edit. We'll just trust you that you're good at it, and you don't know what to look for. It's just you're asking for just failure
That's
and
first
blowing
principles
up.
too, is like me. Let's take this back to carpentry and all those first principles I learned there. It's like now I know all these things about carpentry. And so when I've got a project that I don't want to do myself or I can't do myself, I know what to look for in a quote and in a budget and in a project timeline. Like it's important to just like know from the ground up how these things work yourself, or you're just going to keep getting beat up in the world. Like you're just going to get taken advantage of left and right.
And that's why we're going to be successful. Um, any other? I wrote
Sarah
down
Dietschy
so
said
much.
though, here's the flip side is it's so hard, right? It's so hard for Sarah Dietschy to say, here is how I edit my YouTube videos. This is what you should do. When two sound clips come together, like make sure you put an audio gain to stop it from popping. It's like so much of it is innate at that point that it is hard to let go. I think you're really good at delegating. I think my standards are low enough that like I don't mind. But and when we talk about Sarah Dietschy in a few days, I think that's a big one is how to outsource, especially artistic things is hard.
Yeah, I think anyone should work on that muscle of just being okay with imperfection.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't expect perfection. We're already getting pretty much a perfect product or better than ours in our mind, but think what it can be in 2 years. Like, just have some patience.
Yeah.
And then in 2 years, you don't have to worry about any of this. They're probably ideally, they're the manager of one, just crushing it on their own. I don't know. I'm really wrestling. I used to be someone that's big into SOPs and like having these documents and everything. I see their value, but I feel like it's so much easier for everyone just to hire right the first time and then have that person around for years, have the right company culture that just wants people to stay.
I think that's Basecamp strategy. And I don't think it was in Rework, but it was in the podcast he did. Just like they don't have any processes, right? They just have really smart people working for them that they trust. And yeah, I mean, confining people to a sheet of paper of policies, like not going to do it.
He has a chapter basically on like screw company culture and like granted, I've seen the benefits of like having words on a wall and stuff, but it's not because of the words. It's because of the environment that you've created over time. That's what's going to really be the culture, not what your mission statement is. So I guess that's more founder oriented, but I think there's so much. I need to go through and see.
One thing that's I think crosses a lot of the chasms of the books we've been reading is secrets or no secrets. Do you keep your secrets or do you just kind of blabber about them to see what sticks? And I think what he says about chefs in this book, and this is kind of my last point, and then I want to hear from you, but chefs have like the ultimate trade secret, right? Their recipe is literally what makes and breaks them. But we see chefs happy to write a cookbook and kind of blast their recipes out to the world. I mean, he talks about Alinea. This was in the podcast, I think, one of the most successful restaurant groups in Chicago. And you can buy the Alinea cookbook, and they have a cocktail place called the Aviary. You can buy the Aviary cocktail book. It's important to remember nobody's going to do it like the top chef of Alinea or the Aviary. Nobody's going to do it like the creator. And I think that kind of metaphor is, if you think of yourself like a chef, you should be happy to tell people your trade secrets and then take the feedback.
Yeah, I think that's a new model that people are struggling to wrap their heads around still. I mean, you see it. Basically, my last company was like, give everything for free. But it's under the assumption that you give it all for free. You teach everyone everything, but they'll pay you to teach them again.
Because you're so good.
Yeah, they're like, well, you'll find is like, hey, I understand the principles, but how does it apply to me? Everything can be more personalized. And now you can sell a $5,000 coaching course, basically just summarizing your book, but it's applying it to that particular person. There's so much there.
Any final thoughts?
A couple.
I like ASAP. It's right at the end.
Oh,
give me something.
I didn't get to that. One connected
ASAP
to hiring people. Oh yeah,
You don't like that?
Well, I
like
think
ASAP?
I said ASAP. I said ASAP last night, I think.
Oh, so it's a confirmation bias issue.
Yeah.
Really quick, he's basically like, everyone wants everything done immediately. And if everything's ASAP, then, right, if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. It's important to kind of like hold your emergencies and your priorities near and dear to your vest so that when you actually do need to call on someone to do something quickly, they will, and they'll prioritize that. And
Mm, the
just
boy who
saying
cried
everything's
wolf.
ASAP is, yeah, exactly. It's the boy who cried wolf.
I had related to giving away all your secrets and stuff like that. Really just having an open shop. Like people love the behind the scenes, what's happening. They love how it's made. I mean, there was a Discovery Channel show about that. You see ice road truckers. Who the hell would want to see a trucking show or like a show about
Storage wars,
fishermen? Like you wouldn't think, but
deadliest
Deadliest
catch,
Catch
right?
blows up. People just love that. That's kind of what you're doing. That's a little bit what I'm doing, but it's just being super honest and raw with people because that's just the way the world works. It's not this now pretty frame in the TV and no one gets to see anything else. It just doesn't exist. This facade that's fake.
I think,
That
yeah, people love to pitch in too. I can't tell you how many people reach out to me like, oh, you should make a video about this. Oh, you should go and do this freelance thing. Like, or you should do this in your company. Like, I think this feature would be really cool. And you obviously can't take all those things, but I think people just like, I think it's kind of like a what if kind of thing. It's like, I would like to do that. So I'd like to kind of live vicariously through this thing.
right. You
And I
don't
don't
take
think
the
enough people,
risk and you
right.
still get the input. You get the
Yeah,
creative
exactly.
aspect of it.
Yeah. That's why I love talking to entrepreneurs. It's just fun.
That's the podcast. There are a couple small points like you
You could
want to
tell them
be
to me.
polarizing, right? Don't be the flippy floppy in the middle, just kind of being like, oh, you want to do that for feedback? Like, don't accept all the feedback. You'll hear repeatedly, like you don't have to write down feedback. You'll hear repeatedly shit that's wrong. And then you'll know what to fix. You'll know what to work on. And the rest is just silly. I think that gets to the point of like when we ask for feedback, it's like whatever we're going to do consistently wrong, we'll get feedback there. That's just because we don't have an audience that's screaming at us constantly yet. But yeah.
Could you imagine if we were like the Beatles?
Well, that's
You'd
okay.
make it
I
out the
actually
car.
have this highlighted right now. It's called Obscurity is Great. Relish
Okay.
the obscurity. Because you'll have like Tim Ferriss, for example, he started his podcast after the 4 Hour Work Week, after several of his books were out. And there's this huge pressure and it's hard to conform because you have this large mass of people behind you within your company, whatever. And you can't change direction. Like once you start with something, it's just a lot of pressure there. There's so much, but I don't want to summarize the whole book. Read it, especially I don't know, if you start questioning work, like you're like, why am I doing this? It's silly. It's super relevant now because everyone's online. This is a remote
Yeah, like
company.
I don't think we said it, but rework it's basically he's outlining everything wrong with kind of the formal ways in which we work and how we should look at work and reassess it moving forward. Rework. I didn't
If
get that
you
till the conclusion.
what I know I'm putting you on the spot, so maybe I'll go first, but like in terms of biggest takeaways, I would say for me it's not being afraid of growing slowly.
Which I'm still afraid of. I'm coming around to you. You're like very slow game. And I want to go.
Slow it.
Slow it. You definitely have slow it. My biggest takeaway obviously came from the conclusion because, we only remember the last things we hear. He was basically saying, like, if you've got this thing you're motivated and inspired to do, like, do it right now. Because if you keep putting it off, especially when it comes to to-do lists or projects, whatever, in 2 months' time, you're not going to be stoked about it. You're not going to do it with the same kind of ferocity.
Ferocity.
Ferocity. Ferocious. I was gonna say. The same kind of ferocity that you would today. So he's like, and it goes back to that notion of like, do what excites you. Chase that excitement. Not necessarily your dreams or your passion, but that excitement, that tangible thing that keeps you up to 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Like, what is that thing? And act on that.
That's how I do it. I was just yesterday I was checking out Jack Conte of Patreon. Started that. He's a big creator person. They had a question of like how do you manage motivation or like keep motivation and discipline in check? And I forget who he was quoting, but he basically said like once you have this idea, just do it to completion. Like get it to the point of draft is done. Oh, it was some author. fuck, who's the author? It was like Hemingway or someone that is just like, once the idea is there, the inspiration's there, motivation's there, take it to at least draft form so it's all there. And then the editing process, that's the fun, easy part. But it's already been done. So just start taking action. I think that's massive.
That's it.
And then you don't have to take ridiculous action and be a Facebook IPO. It's just, that's not the way the world works. It's very rare for that.
Right. He says too, like, remember the dry cleaner down the street, very profitable business, have been forever, will be.
That was
forever.
my stepdad owned dry cleaners,
Really?
and like, yeah, just did well. It's like, you don't have to, you can make 100, 200 grand and live better than a lot of millionaires and billionaires. There we go. Read Rework. It's one of my favorite books. I'm going to recommend it, I think, for the rest of my life. I'm curious to see. We didn't get into where we disagree very much. There were a couple points.
A lot of confirmation bias.
A lot of confirmation
There
bias.
were a few. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just trying to look at the chapters. Why don't you tell people to subscribe? Yeah? If you made it this far.
Well, it's too late. Normally, we're supposed to say this in the beginning because who listens to the end? But still, if you haven't subscribed, we would appreciate it. We want to get better guests on. And when you subscribe, plus you slap in that little 5-star review, that's the only metric that people see. So they're like, oh, 5 stars. And there are 100 of them. This is going to be a good podcast. So
yeah, just, say hi. Give us a review. Let us know how we're doing.
We get a bunch of 2-star reviews.
There were a few. Let's not get into it. What?
Okay,
what?
Really quick. I'll end on this. He starts the book with this, but the real world is a joke. There is no fucking real world. It's just a made up world of people having excuses for why they can't do cool shit that they want to do. And this is your blueprint for how to do it. So
I saw a tweet last night. They were like, is all life just exchange of money from one person to the other? Like, that's kind of a boring world we live in. That's pretty much all it is. It's just, I'm going to pay you and you're going to pay me kind of for the rest of
Pass
ever.
it all around. That's all you're trying to do in the world is increase that velocity of money, more passing around, because each iteration, you're adding value. You're creating value out of nowhere.
And that'll do it.
Belky, this is the second to last podcast before we're in person. We have Monday, we have Sarah Dici, and I guess it's on David Perel. Yeah, there are a bunch of podcasts. Hopefully you don't switch it up on me last minute, but that's the plan right now. Thanks for listening, y'all. And we'll see you on episode 54.
See you, dude.